people can. And so people can visit it all week long or at leisure, because I know we are having some things doing a lot of events that are happening around the city. I know a lot of people at the Overture Center watching the Temptations right now. But what I wanted us to kind of share, kind of set the narrative, because we're getting ready to go into a whole new election process, whole new, and all the campaigns, and what we're not hearing a lot about. We're not hearing our voices. And so when we talk about voting and social justice and wellness, the stress of COVID, the uncertainty, the lack of resources, the fear of dying or being exposed, losing loved ones, and et cetera. We've been through a lot in terms of the political and the social justice realm. Now we have the folks killing babies in schools, and we're still having some of the violence against Black folks, the violence and the pulling back of rights, the gerrymandering. We have so much stuff that is going against all of the things that our ancestors died, fought for, restored, and kept moving forward. And so how do we, as a group, really look at carrying that torch and pushing forward that narrative, making sure that we protect voting rights, that we protect that we work on social justice issues, and that we lead the charge, not so many having our allies lead so much stuff, but having us lead the narrative and direct the narrative and be at the table, and not finding or reading or hearing about things later, but being there. And if we're working with separate but equal, then allow us to be in our space to do the work like our forefathers did in those areas. So that is, and I just want you to introduce yourself, talk about your philosophy around the political, the voting, social justice, and then we can have some Q&A. And as we are doing that, maybe our two other folks will be able to jump on. But if not, I know that Miss Sheila Stubbs, representative, former county supervisor, first lady, can really carry this room by herself. But Savion, one of the things I try to do is be strategic. The school district is where wellness, social justice, and voting or inclusion, having your political rights, like being welcome in the schools, being informed about what happens to your children. So as a part of that body that oversees that, I want you to talk from that vantage. I saw April, she was the new county supervisor. So I wanted her to talk about voting and social justice and wellness in terms of that political platform. And then I was waiting for Joelle to come and talk about it from a city. Now she's the vice president of the city council. So having that lens. And so what kinds of things that we can do to share with our public, but also get people to get involved in the chat. And we ask viewers to please use the chat. And the chat will be monitored and watched, and we will respond to questions as they come up, or as we get ready to do that in the discussion piece. So with that, I am going to start with Ms. Sheila. You want to go first, or do you want our brother Savion to introduce himself? Because he's the new boy on the block.
He's the new. Oh, and he was my former staffer. So Savion, you want to go first, and then I'll go after you.
Yeah.
Let's give you that platform.
Yes.
Well, if you don't mind going first, I'm getting my thoughts together. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, I can go first. You've always done a great job with preparations. My staffers have always prepped me well, so I'm more than excited to go ahead and start this discussion. But first, give an honor to God, who is the center of my life. I certainly want to thank you, Ms. Annie Weatherby Flowers, for giving me this honorable opportunity again to be a part of the Juneteenth festivities. I don't take it for granted, but I want you to know how much I truly appreciate the invite. So Juneteenth is a day to celebrate the resiliency of the Black community and to continue pursuit of freedom in our community. We're not done with freedom. It's pursuing greater freedom. We must always remember the continued fight against injustices and take meaningful steps to promote equity in the state of Wisconsin. Juneteenth celebrates the strides we have made in the Black community and our continued dedication to freedom. Freedom is not free. It is a cost to freedom. Some people died. Some people lost their lives along the way. But remember, freedom is not free. It is vital that we always remember and celebrate Juneteenth to ensure we never forget what we have achieved, but together we make this community a better place to live every day. And so the question that has been proposed to me is around voting. What is my perspective? What is my thoughts? And so here's what I think about voting. As President Obama once said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a vote that doesn't matter." Let me say that again. As President Barack Obama once said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a vote that doesn't matter." Voting is the lifeblood of our democracy. The integrity and the progress of our nations rely on every American to have the ability to voice their opinion at the ballot box. Every American deserves to be counted and to have their voices heard. In 2018, a very important year in my life, I became the first African American from Dane County to be elected to the state legislature, breaking 170 years of history. Why I'm deeply proud and honored to represent my community. I could not have done this work. I could not be in this building right now as we speak without the trailblazers that fought for my right to vote. And that is why we must continue to protect that sacred right and promote voting in our community. I have been a part of the NAACP, not a part of my life, not some of my life, but all of my life. I understand what social justice is. So for me, what does social justice really mean for Rep. Stubbs? I'm glad you asked me. Wisconsin is the worst place to raise a Black family. As of 2019, Wisconsin has the highest rate of infant mortality among non-Hispanic Black residents. And that was a problem for me, not only while I've been at the state capitol, but while I served 16 years on Dane County Board of Supervisors. So last session, I introduced Assembly Bill 932, which created a funding priority for the Department of Human Services to fund maternal and child health services that improve the health and economics of disadvantaged minority groups. This session, I supported Governor Evers' budget, which invested $30 million into the Healthy Women, Healthy Babies initiative. In 2018, only 23% of Black Wisconsinites are homeowners compared to 71% of white. That's a problem, Ms. Annie. In Dane County, only 18% of Black residents are homeowners compared to 50% of white residents. That's a problem, Ms. Annie. According to a 2020 report from the National Association of Realtors, Wisconsin is the third worst state in regards to Black home ownership. 38% of Wisconsin's incarcerated population is Black. Why? Why is that the reality in Wisconsin? In Madison, in Dane County, let me bring it a little closer. in the county where we have our state capital, in the county where a flagship university, a top 10 university, University of Wisconsin-Madison reside, a dot, 46% of Blacks are incarcerated as the population. For juveniles, 70.5% of juveniles in detention centers, 129 juvenile arrests in the city of Madison for violent crimes. 96 of these juveniles arrested were Black. That was 74.4%, while 27 were white, which is 20.9%. In essence, what am I saying? We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. The reality is this city has been a tale of two cities. But I'm so glad for you, Miss Annie, who reminds us to reflect on our past, but to remember where we are currently. Those are my perspectives on voting and my perspective on social justice. And my final comment would be on those two areas. As an elected official, I've said it for 16 years. Elected officials need to talk less and we need to do more action. And with that being said, I'm honored to return this back over to you, Miss Annie, so I can hear others that are on this panel. You're on mute, Miss Annie.
I really enjoy just being in the presence of the passion, and then also witnessing you equity work you've been doing, helping getting the flag raised for the first ever in the state of Wisconsin. And I go back to when you was a probation officer and how you the clients I had who were on your caseload, the successes that we have. I was one day at my office and a FedEx guy, kind of like, I don't know if he was FedEx, but he came in and I signed for a package and he said, "Don't you remember me?" And I looked at him because he was on my list. And he was also one of the young men at that time who you were his supervisor, his probation officer. So you and I go way back in terms of, this is not new for being about it in terms of really advocating for people, for Black and brown people and marginalized folks in this community. So thank you for, and I really appreciate that. So some of us are new to this work, and some of us have been around these tables a long time, and some of us have been around these tables for generations. And so we have a newer person who's younger, but it came out trailblazing. So I want you to kind of give some of your personal philosophy, Mr. Savion, about voting, about social justice, and about the wellness in our community. That's mental health. That's all of the things that we see as dire needs right now.
Yes, thank you so much. And to pick up on your thoughts there, I truly believe and appreciate and respect that this is a intergenerational fight that we're in for justice in our communities, and sit here and we are reflecting on what Juneteenth means here today in 2022, really the meaning of freedom and liberation in our communities. That's what we are in pursuit of when we're talking about social justice. And so my philosophy on social justice is deeply informed by the history that we have to inherit. I view that history as one of resisting against injustice. It's a history of building our own communities in the face of harm. And it is also a history of finding joy in some of the most dire circumstances. And so when we talk about wellness, I really want Black people on this Juneteenth, the descendants of enslaved Americans on this Juneteenth, to find their joy, because the Lord has given us one life here on this earth, and we have to cherish every single moment of it. And we need to still keep that responsibility to community, but we also need to take care of ourselves, take care of our personal wellness, because if we aren't taken care of, then we can't take care of our community. And so in my work as both an educator and a member of a board of education, I view that there are largely three goals of an education. One is that everyone can read and count numbers. The second one is that everyone has an ability of self determination to write their own biography and chart their own course. And third is to raise socially conscious citizens with the responsibility to give back to their community. And so I take a very explicit path in terms of talking about our country's history without holding back at all. We can't be naive in terms of what we're talking about, especially with these stats that Rep. Stubbs just talked about. We can't hold that back from our babies. We have to also instill in them the confidence that we can and will change our reality. So speaking to the ability of self determination for every single young person. When I look back on our history, I see so many of our ancestors who did not have that ability and work so hard so that we can have that ability. And I think that we have to pass the torch even further so that those future generations that inherit the history that we're living in right now have more freedom and more ability to self-determine, and that we make our communities better. We pass on better communities to our children. When I think about voting, voting is just one tool to change our lives for the better. It's not the only tool, but it's an important tool. And what I think is especially special about voting is that it gives us an opportunity to organize in our communities. I think the concept of organizing communities will really be what sets us free in the long run, and that we come together and we co-create our visions of freedom and wellness together, what it's like to live amongst all of our differences. I think we have to embrace difference, so that just because someone is a different color skin than you doesn't mean that we discriminate based upon that, or someone has a different religion from you, that doesn't mean that we discriminate based upon that. We embrace the difference and we celebrate the difference that's in all of our communities. A part of this panel discussion was about uniting the Black African diaspora here in Madison. The African diaspora is so diverse and has a multitude of beautiful differences. And it's in that realm of community organizing that we can bring our differences together instead of setting us apart. And I think in those differences, we can also find a common concern that we all want our children to succeed in school, so that they can also take up the torch in the future, and continue this fight for justice in our communities. And that means also in our fight for justice, reconciling, going through a truth and reconciliation process, a healing process to heal those past traumas that we have faced in our history. And so those are just some of my thoughts. But it has been let's just acknowledge it for all of our wellness. It's been a long 2 years since COVID started. And I think it's really important that we look inward and reflect and do some introspection to take care of our mental and physical wellness.
I was listening to your conversation when you were talking about the African diaspora. There are a lot of differences, but there is a whole lot of similarities. And those similarities are our pitch, our tone, our faith, our love for our community, our food. It's our rhythm, is the way we see the world and how we interact with each other and how we love family. So I've been doing some things in Healing Lab, so I'm just paraphrasing, but there are characteristics across the diaspora that we all share. And so one of the things that in my day, when we did, before all of the phones and all of the social media, when we did political actions or organization, we brought families. So our kids got to see their parents involved and engaged in those kinds of activities. Now we just kind of have a Zoom meeting and, so I know that we're doing things differently, but there are some things that are fundamentally that we need in terms of controlling this narrative or shifting the narrative where we are saying this is what we need in our community. This is why you need to vote. When we turned 18, my mother or my father took each one of us to register to vote. It wasn't an option that you could decide to register to vote. There was a different times in terms of how families and how people of color embrace that. When you think about modern times and some of the things in your time that you've seen that are different. But not worse, but different, or not bad, not better, but different from the way you were introduced to the role of voting, your civic duty, the role of really looking at social justice. But back then it was civil rights and equal opportunities and affirmative action. So we can diversity and inclusion, we can name all the titles. But so let's talk about that. I think if we really are going to really look at it, let's look at it holistically and generationally, because some of that you might have been a young child going with your mother to a rally, or going to your mother to a meeting, or going to your mother to pass out flyers or leaflets. I mean, there are things that mothers, particularly a lot of single mothers, it's always been women who have really did that kind of work for the social justice or the civil rights era. So that's my, I think big picture. So I think in stories. So that is a part of my African diaspora. A storyteller.
As far as the Office of Equity and Inclusion, Dane County opened our very first Office of Equity and Inclusion with the leadership of myself, County Executive Parisi. And when we opened that office, that was the placeholder to address all of these inequities that had happened in Dane County since 2010. I can say that there's a difference between an Office of Equity and Inclusion than when I remember EEOC, civil rights, social justice. Now there's so many people that use the phrase OEI, 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 and diversity means so much to so many people. And when I opened that office, not only did I put the resolution out for the office to be open, I also named the office after Tamara Grigsby, who's a former state representative, who would have been the first director of OEI, but unfortunately she passed. It was a place where I wanted to see changes happening in the county, in every agency, over 30 agencies. And I could say one of the ways that I thought was the best approach is I hear people talk about equity and I hear people talk about racial disparities, right? But what are you doing? Be very specific. And from my law enforcement perspective, if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen. So one way that I approached it was, let's make sure that we have these racial disparities reports. And I wanted every department to address the inequity that happened in their department. Tell me what initiatives you're going to put out there. Tell me how you're going to hire more people of color. Tell me why you haven't hired more people of color. Look at your job descriptions. Are your job descriptions set in a way that a person of color don't even apply. Do we really need them to have, you know, a master's degree or PhD? Can they have a bachelor's degree? Can they have life experience? That was one way that I approached it. The second way that I approached it at the state level is when I was elected in 2018 and met with Governor Evers, and it was one of the bills that he liked was to create an Office of Equity and Inclusion at the state level. Because it's fine to address it at one county, but what about the rest of the counties across the state? So trying to do it from a bigger perspective. However, Democrats are not in control at the state legislature in no house. I wasn't able to get the bill to get one Republican to sign the bill. There was the stats, it's reality, but people didn't want to believe that. So Governor Evers was able to introduce an executive order that we can at least get started on some trainings of perspectives and on equity initiatives. So that was number two. Number three, I can say, as I was growing up, I didn't have a choice. My mom pulled me to NAACP meetings. That's how I became so involved. The first campaign I worked on was my uncle, Walter Knight, who was the first African-American city councilman in Beloit to be elected. That was my first campaign. Then I worked on Senator Baldwin's campaign. I worked on her campaign as a congresswoman. I moved to Mississippi and worked with Benny Thompson's campaign when he ran for Congress. And then I ran for Miss NAACP. I loved it so. And when I moved back to Wisconsin, I continued that legacy because I understood that someone died. And I just stopped there sometimes. I think generations have lost that concept, especially younger generations. Someone died just so that you have a right to vote. Someone died just so that we can enter these institutions. You can work out a Fortune 500 job. You can walk in a restaurant. You can own a car lot. And I have to think about that oftentimes because it's my reality check. And so I can say, Ms. Annie, as I reflect on Juneteenth, and as I think about social justice, and I think about the Office of Equity and Inclusion, I look at the Office of Equity and Inclusion as a perspective where people, everyone is saying it. I want to see action. I don't want to read all these reports. Show me what you're doing. Take the pie out of the sky and put it on the table. I know EEOC work is actionary work. And I just want to continue to see the work being done because there are so many people across the state that are dependent on it. Their life depends on it. Their job depends on it. Their wellness depends on it. So we can no longer take it for granted. And we must, Ms. Annie and Savian, hold people accountable. When they're not doing what we want them to do, then we need new elected officials. That's what I believe in, and that's my democracy, and that's my stand on equity.
Well, thank you, Representative Stubbs. And so, Savian, you got any thoughts or any?
Yeah, I think when we talk about because the term equity has almost been co-opted by a lot of people because they don't understand the inequities that happen. They don't understand the injustice that occurred for these inequities to continue. And so that's where I think education is especially powerful to give people that context and spur some sense of responsibility to their community. And then as Rep Stubbs talked about, it's got to be followed up with action. Show me your budget commitments. Show me the policies and practices you changed. And then I think what's really powerful is the work of art in our community. We talk about wellness and creativity. And as you mentioned, Miss Annie, the similarities across the African diaspora, there are a lot of similarities in our storytelling and our art. And what art can do is change the culture. It can change hearts and minds for all of us. And we have made some very powerful pieces of art that have moved people into action. And so that's what I'll add is that we can't forget the creativity and artistic expressions that exist, that contributes to, you know, the wellness of our community and compels people to act by changing their mind and giving them context.
Thank you, Brother Savion. And I was, you know, I'm a big picture thinker, so I'm gonna throw some more things out. I'm planning on being the moderator. So we live in a city where we are the worst, the top, the 50th number, the top one of 50 states. We're the worst place for incarceration of people. We're the worst place in terms of social justice. We're the worst place in terms of Black folks in leadership. Capacity to make changes. We're in the worst place where our kids of color are not being educated. And so we have all of these inequities, we have all these statistics, we have all these buzzwords about equity. And like you said, you know, don't show me your equity statement. Show me your hiring, your retention. Show me where your money goes. Show me how the people are faring. Show me the climate of your city. Show me talk about the climate in your workplace, talk about the climate in your community, talk about, you know, all of the different ills and things that when we say we're equity. And so today, if you could say something to people who look like us, because I really want us to you know, because charity begins at home, then it spreads abroad. So I want what you could say to people who look like us. And then as you do that, expand to what a real ally is, and to you. Because ally, people say I'm an ally, but are you an ally between 9 and 5? Or are you an ally 24/7? Now, who are your friends? Who come to your house for dinner? You know, you know, where do you live? How many, you know, do you interact with your neighbors of color? And so that is kind of, when we're really talking about voting and equity, we're talking about having, you know, having a place at the table, but also having the authority to engage, to make decisions and to affect change. Sometimes the equity is just being at the table where you have no role that affects change. One of the things, unless you make that happen, like my dear sister Sheila has came in trailblazing with those Millie Jackson moments around the council, around the county board table and other tables that she's at. So that's what I really want us to kind of look at it from internal in our community, look at us, and then look at it in terms of externally. How, what is some of your hopes? Speak to both your community and your allies.
But first and foremost, Ms. Annie, it's personal for me. And I think that brings in a different perspective. For me, being an African-American woman living in Madison, Wisconsin, and I personally have experienced racial profiling, something that still haunts me this day that I never thought I would have experienced. In 2018, being asked for 3 forms of ID, being asked why am I in a white neighborhood in 2018 in Madison, Wisconsin. There are so many issues that plagues our community. And I think it's also important while we're having this conversation that we have our community that's there to be supportive of us as we're having and in going through these particular experiences. When I was profiled, I was with my 8-year-old daughter at the time and my 71-year-old mother. When my mother's been a former president of the NAACP, she can handle her own. But my 8-year-old, what's in her mind for the rest of her life, her wanting 2 people that she trusts, 2 people that have worked in systems, be disrespected. Me telling my daughter to always go to the police. It's a safe place to go, and finding a police officer disrespecting her mother and her grandmother and confusing my daughter. The extra time it's taken for me to share with her the importance and explain it to her about perspectives and explain it to her about perceptions and racial disparities and talking about, you know, different levels of perspectives, and having to have a conversation with my daughter at 8, I didn't think that I needed to have. And because of that, as I approach every disparity, I'll share this with you, Ms. Annie, as I was a probation and parole agent well over 15 years ago, I knew we were in trouble in the state of Wisconsin because I saw basically my entire caseload, African-American men, and half were women. I knew we were in trouble. I didn't need a report to tell me we were in trouble. I saw it with my own eyes in a system that was never fair nor equal, a justice system that doesn't really look like us, but is quickly to give us a different experience than some of our white counterparts. So I saw it firsthand as an agent, someone who would visit our prisons and our jail across the state of Wisconsin and go to the front desk and have an NCIC background check done on me, enter a courtroom and they think I'm that particular probation parolee's mother or girlfriend, but not being respected as that professional. So I know in the state of Wisconsin, there were problems. And so as I was in a position that God put me in, to be on the county board for 16 years, it was my responsibility to begin that conversation and to have very difficult conversations with the county board that was not very diverse. But I refused to be pushed down or shut up. I refused to allow people to tell me we weren't having problems. I knew it, but it took another organization that others around this community felt safe agreeing to, because Urban League of Greater Madison said, you know, the state of Wisconsin before the tipping point, we had a Black-led organization tell us that we were in trouble in the state of Wisconsin, did not receive the same respect from media that one of our other organizations with the Race and Equity Report. Very honored that the report was out there, but it took some other organization with a different voice to identify the same issues that Blacks have been saying the entire time. And so for me, I looked at every issue and I began to say, where can I make progress? What policies can I introduce? What policies can I dismantle? Because policies are made to be broken. They're bridges to nothing. So I would break down that. How can I introduce the legislation? What does it take to get County Executive Parisi to sign an executive order? What does it take? And so I use that perspective. I also use the NAACP to help me. I use the church voices. I use the African-American pastors to come and talk to me. I went to my sorority. I told as many groups as I could the realities. Not only that, I was given a chance to be in the media a lot to talk about it, but I can share this with you. When I stood in my seat, I held departments accountable because they had to report to me every year in the budget what they were doing as it relates to equity. And that is one way of holding the line and holding people accountable, because I was in a position that I could reduce their budget. And so they knew it was very serious for me. In fact, very quickly, I'll share this with you. I remember the first time I stood up and asked every department head, over 30, tell me what it means for racial disparities in Dane County. What are you going to do? One of the department heads said to me, oh, I didn't get the memo. Is this a joke? No, there's nothing funny about these disparities. Absolutely not. And so because of that, the county board staff helped me to make sure every budget cycle, it was written. I didn't have to stand up and press the button and ask every department head, where do you stand on these policies? So holding people accountable in that way. So those have been my approaches. Miss Annie, it's been personal for me, but I'm a transcender. I'm a trailblazer, and I stand. If I don't stand for something, I'll fall for anything. That's what the Bible says. So I stood, and I've stood on a very solid ground, and Dane County has changed because of my leadership on so many levels.
And then we have a question in the chat.
We can go straight to the question in the chat right quick. I think, you know, just a few thoughts. You know, I don't think what we're searching for isn't a numerical. I don't think we can afford to rest on what we've done. And I don't think allies can afford to be complacent and rest in what they do. I think we kind of have to take the approach of it's not good enough, and really embrace the philosophy of continuous improvement in our lives. And I'm sorry, the weather is getting really bad out there. But and I think, as Rep Stubbs said, we have to bring a fierceness to this fight, because again, we can't afford to be complacent. We have to be really kind of stubborn and head first in this fight. There is no room for any more breaks or holding back, because there are literal lives on the line here. And so that's kind of the attitude that I try to bring in, that, you know, we can't afford to hold back.
Thank you, Savion. We have a chat one, which probably means you, the two of you. Do you believe that one must advance the agenda or become an ally of another group to get the agenda advanced for Black people, or to attract more support from other groups? So can we do this work without allies? Or do we need to have allies, and who can be an ally to help advance what we're doing? I think that in terms of, I were to listen to kind of interpret that question, you know, so allyship, and should people be allies, and what does that look like? And can we do this work without allies? And so hearing that question, so whichever.
Go ahead, Sabian.
Yeah, when we were talking about voting, I said voting was an opportunity to organize in our communities. And I think, especially in systems like democracy, we have to build coalitions with people. And that's something that Dr. King saw before his untimely assassination, was that he was trying to form a broad coalition with working class folks of all races and religions, the Poor People's Campaign. And so I do think that is the next challenge for us as folks organizing in communities, is to build a broad tent. So, and I think a worthwhile vision is a true multiracial democracy. I think that is how we can really thrive. But of course, I think that it's always good that folks in the African diaspora have that pride, and we hold on to our culture, and we don't let our cultural principles go in that work of building coalitions with other people.
So I would agree with you, Sabian, in that piece. But I think for anything, you need a leader. And I think that was something Dr. King was absolutely brilliant and strong in. He had the right charisma. He had the leadership ability. He was given the words to say it, and people believed in him. And I think that's what's really important as you're advancing the agenda. Do you believe in the person who's leading that work in the agenda? Are they fluffing? Are they coming back with results? I can say personally, sitting on county board with 37 supervisors for about 10 years, I was the only African-American on county board, but I was able to advance policies around racial equity work, because I got in many rooms and I said, I am African-American. I know firsthand what it's like, and I am going to lead this work. So I didn't give people an opportunity to say, no, you don't get a chance to. If they really believed in the work, what was wrong with supporting me to do that work? And when you're in an elected official position, you're in rooms sometimes, even though you're all on the same team, not everybody agrees. Not everybody wants to move that particular way strategically on a policy. I refuse to turn back, and I refuse to accept no, and I refuse to accept the status quo. So many times I stepped out on faith, and because I have really good, strong relationships, I was able to get myself in a position where other groups supported my work, because I had a report card that showed I was very, very successful. So I see it from a twofold perspective, that you have to have a leader that you trust, and then you have to trust that agenda.
So when I think about, when listening to you, thinking about allyships, it's like, it's okay to be an ally. And it's okay to be, when we back in the organizing, is that one of the greatest things about a good organizer is that they lead from behind, because they put the people who are most impacted front and give them all the resources and all the support and all the training and all of the things they need to go move forward. And I think in terms of having real allies, is that a real ally would be like back in the shell trap organizing, they would lead from behind, they would push from behind, or they would walk with and say, well, I'll open that door because I know that door hasn't been open to you. I know the people behind this door. And so once we get this door open, then we go in and then you talk and you lead. But most of our diversity and inclusion and equity initiatives are being led in Dane County, really about people who don't really look like us, if you really want to get to the crust of it. But then when the Office of Equity and Inclusion came about, you still had the equity department, equity heads and equity components in every other department who were necessarily leading from their perspective. And there's not this coalition where if we're working at equity, how do we get everyone across the board at the county, to city, to state, whatever, our communities to work in conjunction and to not be afraid to let the people who are most impacted lead and tell the story, because they can tell the story differently. And maybe they may not know how to pull up all the statistics, but if you are allied and that's your lane, lead from behind with that. And so one of the things that I do, when you talked about Dr. King, he really did a really good job of building allies, but his core team were people who were experiencing the same thing that he was experiencing, that people were experiencing, so they wouldn't lose heart of it. If I've never been hungry, I don't know what it's like to be hungry. If I've never been on the verge of eviction, if I've never had anybody fail to hire me because of my color of my skin, or make reasons not to promote me, or not speak to me. I'm a manager at the library. I can walk through the Central Library and not be spoken to by groups of my white counterparts. I can be asked. I'll never forget, I came up to my office and they were onboarding the new staff, and the staff person who was onboarding the new staff. So if you see Annie up here on the 3rd floor, administrative level, she belongs here. But she didn't say it about any of the other managers who walked past. So it was clearly about race, but nobody saw that as a microaggression in my team. So when I went to staff meeting, I brought it up as a great example of a microaggression. But did I have any allies? Because there was no ally in that circle to say no. Why would you say something like that? You didn't say it about anyone else. So if we're going to be allies, we need to really look at ways to do that. And so I just I'm here challenging you. That's why I bring people who are bold, because you're in those spaces. And then we know people in our community who have those skills and who has those things. And so how do we really look at promoting social justice, voting and wellness? Most doctors will shoot a pill at something without even getting to know you or your body type or your DNA or your genetic predisposition or any of those things. So how do we do that in terms of coalition building? You are doing it in terms of coalition building at the county. Now you're gone, there's an absence. So we have April. So that is somebody to bring under your wing and say, these are the allies that worked with me. These are the people that will support, equity work, will support climate, or support change. So Savion, do you have any kind of strategic kinds of ways that you see moving forward? In terms of freedom, in terms of equity, in terms of fairness, but just plain justice. What is morally right as you move forward in the school board or in the community? Same for you. Mm-hmm. Same for you, Representative Stubbs.
When we think about coalition building, I I think it starts in the classroom and how we organize a learning community. When I look at the MMSD student demographics, we're majority Black and Brown, still about 48%. I'm sorry. Yeah, 42% white, 58% Black and Brown, but in that we have 20% Latinx students, 20% Black students, and 20% Asian students. And so I think we're seeing a vision of what that multiracial coalitional organizing can look like. And it starts with the grounding of knowing our history and knowing all of our unique journeys to get here, and trying to build a collective vision for what our collective freedom and liberation can look like with those young people. And they're really in a vulnerable space too, in that they're all trying to learn how to read, learn how to write. They're all trying to become more socially conscious of their surroundings and look after their mental and physical well-being, building those really long-lasting friendships that last a lifetime, that start in the classroom. And so I look at that and I see opportunities for what works and how they learn each other's history, they learn each other's family and kinship patterns and practices in their families. And it's an opportunity to share too, what their practices are. But I'll just go back to what I said before, is that we can't hold back in terms of telling our stories about the injustices we face in our lives. And also we can't hold back on being who we are. When I think about lessons from Brown v. Board, one of the unintended consequences was that we lost kind of our identity, because it's not like after desegregation, we closed down all the white schools and bused all the white kids to the Black schools. No, we did the opposite, unfortunately. And so I think in that integration, the cost was losing some of our identity. And so in this work, I think we have to hold strong on maintaining our identity in all these different spaces of coalition building.
Mhm. Representative Stubbs.
Yeah, so I think that one, you can't be afraid to do something different.
Mhm.
For me, I didn't always have all the support that I wanted, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I'll give you an example. You might have remembered when we were talking about the building after President Obama had been elected, and I wanted to do something honorable in the state of Wisconsin, in Dane County. And so someone thought it was honorable to name the city county building after President Obama. And I said, the building is fine. However, let's talk about what's in the building. On the second floor, we incarcerate children. On the 6th and 7th floor, we incarcerate adults. So what's honorable about naming this building after President Obama? There's so much we can do. Well, it started a whole heap of issues that I had to go and use electronic polling system to actually ask people across Dane County, do you think we should name this building after President Obama? And overwhelmingly, people said, no, I agree with you. Name water, an airport, other things, but not that building. At the time, I didn't have the support, but there was one African-American elected official who saw me, and I was like, can you believe they want to name this building? And that elected official said, I'll go with you. Let's talk with the media, and the media was there. And let's tell them why we don't want to name this building after that. I had one elected official at that time come to my rescue and agree with me. And, and then to find other groups that would step out, because I put my name out there. I was against like majority of county board, majority of city council really believe they should name that building. And I stood by myself and I was like, no. But in that process, I was able to get the NAACP to join me. And once the letter was written by President Jones, the decision changed. And so I just want to talk about how sometimes you have to step out there on your own when you know what's right for your community, even though you don't have the ally, you don't have the co-conspirator, because they've disagreed with you. And that's been an experience that I've had. And as far as wellness, at the state level, I introduced the Birth Equity Act. And it was really important because we had organizations that were Black-led or BIPOC-led talk about the disparity as it relates to us. And they came up with the bills and they asked me to introduce them. And that's what I'm also talking about as we're advancing agendas and we're doing the work, is when people find that you are a great leader, but you are a leader who's productive, who gets results, and you don't stand down, right? And so that's the stance that I've taken, and it's been very helpful. It's worked, but there's been many times, Ms. Annie, on this line and telling your viewers, I've taken a lot of risks, but with God on my side, every one of them have been successful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm sitting here and I remember that battle. And so out of all the buildings in this city and this county, you know, why that one? And so I thought, okay, we could have changed the Monona Terrace or we could have named, but when I think about the city county building, I think about my friend, see, now there go my brain, tall, come on, it come back to me. But anyway, I won't hold this up. But he did a lot of work as the second minority service coordinator for Dane County. And he passed a couple of years back. And it'll come to me. I'll be walking down the street and his name will come back.
Are you talking about Ken?
Ken Haynes. And
who worked for Executive Block.
Yes, and he not. I remember having him at a part of the preschool reading around racial equity or one of the task force of Mayor Sue Ballman, and I had this 6'4" man at Head Start doing the chicken dance, exposing kids to successful people of color. And so when I think about, you know, all of the things that we have been doing and all of the people who have been at the forefront, that we've made great strides, you know, but today I think we need to have some history, you know, remembering that we stand on we are the hopes and the dreams of the slaves, but we stand on the shoulders of the people who went before us, and not from the 60s, but we're talking about people like Miss Malele, people who are in more recent times. And one thing I'd like for you guys to say to you guys when I'm doing all of this is to say, keep fighting, keep doing, you know, keep going, because we never know who we're inspiring for the next generation or for the next moment, or how many people who are seeing us and saying, okay, go, or who are praying for us while we're doing the work, who prayers are opening up doors and giving us access. And so I just wanted to say in closing, because we've been an hour and we haven't had anyone else jump on, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But this will be recorded. It'll be on our website, on our Facebook page, as well as on our YouTube channel. But I want to encourage you to keep fighting. As you know, and like, you know, I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to repeat it in every one of these sessions so people can say what they want to say. The word tells us to seek justice and take care of those in needs and take up the widow's charge. And so I keep saying that the widow is like our modern day single parent mothers who kids are being taken out of the home through crime, through slavery, through juvenile detention, through all kinds of things. How do we as a community look at the moral obligation and take on a moral look? Because I think one of the things that we've lost is that Dr. King, while he was so successful, he took a moral stance and a biblical stance on injustice, so that it cut across every believer, every parent, every aunt, every grandmother. So we need to bring that humanity, that humanity to the work we do. It is not just a task. It is not just a statement. It is real work. Dr. King died for it. So how do we stand boldly on that history and think that we are the hopes and the dreams of the slaves? And how do we continue to be that voice in places they could never dream of being? And with that, I want to say thank you and keep up the work. And I look for wonderful things from you, Savion. And I know Aunt Hazel is really proud. Your grandma is really proud. And so be encouraged. And I'm always someone to stand along with you, to open doors and bring you in places where I have access. And so continue to be brave and continue to do the work, because God has placed you in the place for such a time as this. And it's what you do with what he's put in your hand. And every time God sent someone to do a work, he told them, be strong and be courageous, but use what's in your hand. And if you want to think about Moses' staff, in the days of before we had social media and all of these, the staff had every one of your accomplishments carved into it. So when God moved in BC 3, you carve that in it when, and so use what's in your hand, and you have a staff with all of your accomplishments and all the things that God has said to you. Use that. And I'm going to say good night and thank you for the last time.